Hi guys, it's Mr. Dodds here. Whilst you're off on shutdown, we're going to be making sure we keep our coding skills nice and sharp and hopefully learn a few new tips and tricks as we're doing it. So we've prepared a few video lessons to show you how to create a simple looking but nicely coded scrolling game. Now the lessons are going to be split across 3 videos, which will each take it a different part of the video game and show you how to create it step by step. Now I'm just going to give you a demonstration on screen of the type of game we're trying to create over the next few videos and how you can adapt it to your one. So I'm just going to show you how it works. When I press the green flag, I'm controlling the car in the middle here with my arrow keys, and the objective is to collect the apples whilst avoiding any of the rocks and the trees that might appear and get in my way. So as you can see, I use the arrow keys to control the car and try to dodge through the rocks and avoid the rocks, the trees, but also at the same time collect the apples. You can see my score is going up there in the top, but if I accidentally hit one of the rocks or one of the trees, I will start to lose some lives. So you can see that the aim of the game is to try and collect all the apples without actually losing all of your lives. You can see I'm already down to 2 lives, 1 life, and then eventually I will get down to 0 lives. So what we're going to do is we're going to pause the play here, and I'm going to show you how to actually start programming your own game using Scratch at home. Now Scratch is available online. At school we use a version that we have on the computers, but they also offer a free online version. The easiest way to access that online version is to go onto Google and to simply type in Scratch. When you search for Scratch, it will come up as the top result, and if you want to just double check, it is the scratch.mit.edu website. When you click on the website, it will take you through to the Scratch website. If you want to, you can have a look at through some of the other projects that have been created there. These have all been created by other people using Scratch. Some of them are created by people your own age, some of them are created by adults, but you can have a look through it and everything like that. Now you can use Scratch online in 2 ways. You can either create your own account here, so if you ask your parents permission and help, they can help you sign into an account, or you can simply use it for free without creating an account. It's up to you how you do it. Signing in and creating an account does give you a few more options that are not available on the other one, but everything we need to do for this project can be done in the simple free way. Okay, so to actually start your project, you come up to the top here where it says create. As soon as you click create, it will take you through to the coding window that looks similar but a little bit different to what you're used to in school. Now it's got the same areas, but because it's the online version, there's a lot of different colours and some of the blocks are broken down into different areas. So I'm going to just take you through what each section is and then how the blocks are broken down slightly differently than what you're used to. On the screen we still have our stage and we still have Scratch the Cat here as one of our sprites. So our stage here, remember, is the screen of the actual game, and all of our sprites will show up here. The size and position of the sprites is shown directly above them there. The stage itself, the backgrounds, are all shown here on the side here, and if we need to add any new backgrounds or any new sprites, we can simply click and select them from there. This area is our coding window, so this is where we drag our blocks of code to start putting together the instructions for our game. Over here on the left we have our code, our costumes and our sounds. Now for this project we're not going to be using the sounds, but if you want to experiment with them and add them onto your own game, that's absolutely fine. We will though be using the code and the costumes. Remember, in Scratch, costumes is just the word for what the sprite looks like. Okay, so it's not actually to do with his like clothing or anything like that, it's just what he looks like. So he could look like a car, it could look like an explosion, it could look like the cat, whatever you choose it to look like comes from your costumes area. The main bit we're going to be using though is our coding blocks. Now on the version in school it uses the same colour system, so our blue ones control our motion, our purple ones control what he looks like, but remember the looks also contain things like what our sprites can say or think. think. So they control our costumes, but they also control what they say or think, as well as colours, sizes, whether they're visible or invisible, and so on. The sound, as I said, we're not really going to be using the sound for this project, but the options are there if you want to use them. The bit that's a bit different than how we use in school is that our yellow control menu is now broken down into two sections, one called events and one called control. Now events are things that can happen in the game. So for example, when the game starts, the green flag being clicked is an event. Same as when you press one of the keys or click your mouse, that is an event, and the sprites can respond to those events in different ways. So when we press the key, we might get him to move, for example, or we might get the lives to reset, and so on. So the events. All of our if statements and various other control elements are now in this control section. So our wait commands, our repeat commands, our if statements, and our stop commands are all in this section here. Okay, so if you can't find them, if you're trying to find what we used to use in school on the other version, it will probably be in one of these two things. The light blue sensing section, remember, is wherever your sprite wants to sense something. Now that could be touching something, or it could be hearing something, or it could be being in a particular position or responding to a particular key that you've pressed, whether it's your mouse or your keyboard or whatever it happens to be. So the sensing ones are how the sprites interact with each other. So it's how they lose lives, it's how they increase their score, and so on, like that. Okay, so we will be using the sensing one quite a lot in this one. Our operators are where we have access to all of our mathematical symbols like equals, greater than and less than, and a few others. Now we don't use this very much in this one, but we will need it for one key element, which is our background areas. Okay, so just remember that the operators are all here in the green one. Remember, as always, when you're looking at the blocks that I create on screen, use the colours to help you find the right ones. If a block is green, then it's in the operators section, for example. Our variables are still in our orange section, so this will be where we create our scores and our lives. And finally, you have a section called My Blocks, where you can save your own blocks that you use over and over again if you want to. Now we're not going to really be using that today, but if you want to make use of it, it will help you to keep track of all the ones that you might put together that you will use a lot of. Okay, it's a good point here, if you want to pause the video and just have a little look through the different blocks and sort of familiarize yourself with what's going on and where the different things are. If you want to have a little practice putting together some basic code, then that's fine. Just pause the video and then simply click resume once you're happy to carry on. Okay, now the first part of this lesson is going to be setting up our stage. So this first video is going to be dealing with setting up the actual stage and the sprites that we will need for our game. So once you've had your play and you've cleared everything off, you've made sure you've got a completely blank one to start with, we need to go about getting our background set up and our sprites set up. Now the first thing we need to do is get rid of Scratch the Cat here. So we come down to our sprites one and we click on our cross here. We're going to create one like the one I showed you, where there will be some trees either side and some rocks in the middle. However, you do not have to use the exact same sprites as me. If you want to use something else instead of trees, something else instead of rocks, something else instead of apples, that's absolutely fine. But I'm just going to take you through how to do it using that way. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give my background a little bit of colour. So I'm coming up here onto my backdrop here. So I'm clicking on the stage, and over on the left hand side you'll see I've got my backdrops menu. So I simply click onto my backdrops menu like this, and I have to colour it in. Now to colour it in, what I need to do is I need to create a square like this, filled with the correct colour that I want. Now I used a yellowy colour for my one because I was trying to make it look a bit like the desert. So I'm going to stick with that yellow colour, and all I have to do now, once I've got my colour, is simply draw a square over the entire background like that. If it comes across and it's not quite big enough, like you can see mine isn't there at the top, simply use the handles to drag it out until it completely fills the background. And there we've got our nice coloured background on there. If you wanted to add a bit more texture and a bit more detail to it, that's absolutely fine, but it's not strictly necessary for what we're going to do. So once you've got your background done, you're ready to start creating your sprites. Now when you create your sprites, you come down to this menu and you have two options. Well, you have four options really, but there's only two that we're really interested in. You can either search for a ready-made sprite or you can draw your own one. Now for the trees and the rocks and the apples, I'm going to use ones that exist already, but for my car I'm going to paint it. So I'm going to get the trees on first and the rocks and the apple. Now to begin with, I'm only going to get on one of each of them. Even though I had several trees and several rocks and several apples, I only want to get on one of those sprites, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to program everything for one sprite first, and then I'm simply going to copy that sprite over and over again. If I put all the trees on to begin with, I'd have to program one tree, then I'd have to go and program another tree, then another tree, and so on. Whereas if I put one on, as soon as I've got it correct, I can simply copy it over and make sure they all work exactly the same. So I'm going to go on to my sprites and I'm going to look simply for a tree. These are the ones I used before, so I'm going to simply use those again. When it comes on, obviously you can see that that tree is too big. We need to make it a lot smaller than that so that it can line the sides of our gaming area. So to change the size, I come down to my sprite menu here and I click on the size. So I'm going to reduce it to about 30 and have a look at that. That's probably okay. If you wanted to reduce it a little bit more, that's absolutely fine. You make these decisions based on what you think is more appropriate for your game. So all I've done there is I've put the tree on and then changed its size. So as I said before, remember, I'm just using one tree at the minute. I will use several more trees in a moment to make it look like it's moving. Now, the thing to remember with whenever you're playing a computer game is that a lot of it is done in a way that seems the opposite of the way you would think it would be. Now, we're trying to create the image of our car driving down the middle of this canyon with the trees either side. But in computing, it's very often easier to leave the object you're focusing on, your car, leave it in one place and actually move the background. So what we're going to do is, instead of making the car move down, we're going to make the trees and the rocks and the apples move up. And they'll keep moving up endlessly. Once they get to the top, they'll come right back to the bottom and keep going endlessly to make it look like the car is moving forwards, moving down the screen, even though the car will actually be staying at the same height. It will be the trees and the rocks and the apples that will be moving up. So I've got my tree on, and I now need to do the same thing with my rocks and my apple. So I'm going to go into choose a sprite again. I'm going to go into rock, find my rocks, and just like I did with the trees, I need to make sure that rock is an appropriate size for my game. So I'm going to go for 20 again. I might decide 20 is a little bit small, a little bit easy, so I might bring him back up to 30 to make it a bit harder in my game. So I've got my rock there. Now to begin with, it doesn't matter where you put these on the screen. Okay, we're going to move them around later, so for now just make sure you can see them all on the screen and that they're nice and easy to code. Last one is my apple, so I'm going to go into choose a sprite. Apple is right there, or I could search for it if I needed to. Remember, you can use anything you like for these sprites. You don't have to use trees and rocks and apples, but I'm just using those to keep it nice and simple. So I've put my apple on, and then again, just like I did before, I'm going to resize my apple to a better size for my game. Okay, so I've now got my tree, my rock and my apple on. Again, this is now a good point to pause our video and add on your own sprites once you are ready. Okay, when you've added on your own sprites and you've resized them, simply click play again and carry on from where we left off. So by now you've added on your trees, your rocks and your apple. First thing we need to do now is start programming them. Now the trees and the rocks and the apple are going to both all have the exact same initial programming on. They're going to differ slightly later, but they're going to have the same initial programming on. So what we need to do is we need to make sure we're using the exact same bit for all of these. So in fact, the first bit we can do for the tree, once it's working, we can copy it onto the rock and we can copy it onto the apple. So we're going to start with the tree. I've clicked here on the tree to show me that the tree has appeared here, and this is the one that I'm now beginning to code. to code it, I need to decide what I'm going to use. So the first part I need to use is I need to come to my events and I need to use my green flag. Okay, now the green flag, remember, is the button that starts the whole game. So what I'm about to program now will start as soon as I click the green flag, as soon as the game starts. So what I want them to do is I want it to move up the screen. Now remember, my motion ones here have several different options on. I can move, but the move one is left and right, remember. Okay, now I need to go up, I need to change their height. And if you think back to your maths lessons with your X and Y grids, you'll know that the X coordinate is the one that goes across the screen and the Y coordinate is the height of something. So we need to change their Y coordinate. So we need to change their Y coordinate to make it higher. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to this one here, change Y by 10. This one here uses that 10 number that you can change if you want to increase it up. Now if I put it on there like that and I click the green flag, you should see that my tree goes up every time I click my green flag. But I don't want that. I don't want to have to click my green flag every time. I need to make it happen all the time. So I'm going to go into my control area and I'm going to make sure that this goes on forever. So what will happen now is that I'm going to just put it down here so you can see. When I click my green flag, my tree will go up. Okay, so it will go right to the top of the screen. As soon as I click my green flag, right to the top like that. If you think that tree is moving too fast, if you think that's too difficult to do, you can simply change the speed. The lower this number, the slower it will go. So if you want to put it onto 5, that will halve its speed like that. So I'm going to leave it on 5 because I think that's a suitable speed for my tree. Remember that when you're programming the speed of these objects, it might look slow if you're just using one of them. But remember, when the final game comes, there won't just be one. There won't just be one rock. So although one rock might seem slow, by the time you've got 4 or 5 rocks on there, that speed might actually be okay. Now you'll notice that there's a bit of a problem. As soon as we press the green flag, the tree moves up fine, but as soon as it gets to the top of the screen like this, it stops. Now we need to make sure that this tree comes all the way back down to the bottom. Now to do that, we need to come to our if statements. So we're going to bring on our if statement here and we're going to put it inside our forever block. So you can see we've nested the if one inside the forever one. Now we need to make it so that if the tree gets to the top of the screen, it starts again at the bottom of the screen. Now to do that, all we need to do is we need to come over onto our operators. So remember when I said we needed the operators one for a really key part, this is that key part. Now we're going to use this one here, the greater than symbol pointing to the blank section. Okay, so we're going to drag that into here. Now to use this bit, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that we say if the height of the tree, remember the height is shown here, the Y coordinates are shown here, and it's at the minute it's 182, so that its height there of the tree at the minute is 182. We're going to say if that height gets to a certain point, then you need to go back to the beginning. Now as I said, we're using 182 there, that's its height. Now what I'm going to say is I'm going to put that number in here, but I'm not actually going to put 182 because remember I've used the greater than symbol. So I want this height if it's greater than a certain number. Now it isn't greater than 182, so I need to make sure that the number I put in there is less than its maximum height. So here it's 182, so I'm simply going to err on the safe side and I'm going to say 179, a little bit less than 182. So as soon as it becomes 180 or more, it will go back to the beginning. Now here on this one, you'll see that I need to put my height in here. Now I can't just type the word height, I have to come over to this section here. Okay, now if I look down on my motion section, you'll see that down here there is the X position and the Y position. The Y position just means its height, so I simply drag the Y position into this first box like this. Okay, so I zoom my Y position into that box there, and now it's saying if my Y position or my height is greater than 179, I now need to tell it to go back to the bottom. Okay, so what I do, I come down here, set Y to, I put this in here, and I choose the height at the bottom of the screen. Now if you ever need to know the height of something, you can simply move your object to the bottom of the screen, but remember the height of the screen is 180 there and minus 180 here. So in this box I'm going to put minus 180 because that's the very bottom of the screen. So if I press my green flag now, you should see that my tree goes up, but when its height reaches above 179, 180, it goes back to the beginning. Okay, so I've put that there so that it keeps going up. When it gets to a certain height, 179 or above 179, it goes back to the beginning, goes back to the bottom. So you can see my tree is forever now moving up the screen. It never stops. It will keep going, and when I add more trees on, it will make it look like I've done make it look like my object in the middle is moving. Okay, now I'm going to stop that there, and all you need to do now is you need to copy this code onto your rock and your apple. So to copy the code, simply take hold of the code, drag it over to your sprite menu, and you'll see that one of them will start to wobble. So the one it wobbles is the one you're copying it into. So I'm copying it here into the rocks, and then I do this exact same for the apple. So you'll now see that the rock has got the code in, the apple has got the code in, and the tree has got the code in. They've both got that code inside them there. Okay, so both the tree and the apple and the rock have all got the exact same code in. So when I press the green flag now, they'll all move and they'll all carry on up the screen. Now that brings us to the end of our first video of setting up our sprites on the screen here. In the next video we're going to add on our vehicle, and then we're going to add on the other bits of code we need for our trees and our rocks and our apple before we can copy them over onto all of the others. So this video is at the end. All you need to do now is follow the steps that I've outlined here and add these on. As soon as you've added these on and got them working correctly, simply save your work, and then you can look at the next video. Now to save your work, because if you're not signed in, you have to go up here to File, and you can save it to your computer. So simply click Save to your computer, and then it will save it to your computer here down at the bottom, and you can upload that next time. If you don't have time to carry on now, you can close Scratch down, and next time you load it from your computer to start again. So that's our first video. Good luck getting these done. Remember, watch it through again and again if you struggle, but the code you need for all of those three things is this section here. Okay, and then I'll see you in the next video where we'll look at duplicating our sprites and adding on our vehicle. See you next time.